Perfection. The condition, state, or quality of being free or as free as possible from all flaws or defects. Nothing can be perfect, but to strive for perfection is how we get so many of the most beautiful things in this world. Rockstar and how they treat their staff is something that we have to push back against, but I can't argue with what they managed to create in Red Dead Redemption 2. I struggled for a long time to find a way to write about this game because what is there to say that hasn't already been said? This game is as near perfect as I think it's possible to get. It really and truly is a masterpiece that should be put high on the mantle of gaming achievement as a goal for those who find themselves in this field. I really strive to bring you guys something original on this channel, whether that's my passion for the Geth and Mass Effect to lesser known titles like Alpha Protocol or The Saboteur. I always want to try and give you something new to chew on when you watch one of my videos. And for a long time, I avoided RDR2 simply because I didn't think I could say anything new. And in reality, I can't. I'm just late to the party. But then I realized that there's something else I can do. Asking my friend group, I found that almost no one I know has actually played this game, which means a lot of you guys might not have either. So if I can get even one person to saddle up and ride through Arthur Morgan's story, then I will, because I know you'll be glad you did. As usual in these spotlight videos, spoilers only during the spoiler section, and you'll be warned beforehand. Hey, note from the editor here. I had originally planned to only have a spoiler section in the story, but my final thoughts were just simply too interlaced with the story. You'll still have a warning before spoilers start, but they don't truly end. For what it's worth, I left out as much as humanly possible, but still consider yourself warned. Let's not waste time because this is a big game with a lot to talk about. Let's get right into Red Dead Redemption 2. There are few examples of a world that feels more alive to play in than New Hanover. The random encounters alone could make up an entire video. Pair that with endless exploration opportunities, loot to find, animals to hunt, mysteries to solve, and a stunningly beautiful country to see. There's something calling to just about everybody here. I'm really not the explorer type. I don't want 100% games, I don't bother looking for collectibles, and if the first paragraph of something I've found isn't interesting, I'm not reading the rest of it. I'm willing to accept that I'm missing out on things on the trade-off that the destination isn't worth an unfun journey. What I do find, though, is that some games are oh so good at making me tumble down the rabbit hole, and that I do love. Over the course of the game, each chapter will have you in a different camp with different opportunities and most likely a new area to explore. The camp itself becomes a notable part of the game for several reasons. The first is the people. You never know who you're going to find at camp, who's going to be out making money, or who's going to be guarding the door, but the one thing that's constant is the endless motion going on inside the camp. Some people may be happy, others angry, others drunk, but there's always activity going on, and always something to do, whether it be dominoes, five-finger fillet, or a friendly game of poker. Occasionally, people will give you things to find on an offhand comment, and there's the state of the camp itself on top of that. You'll be responsible for not only keeping it well stocked with food, ammo, and medicine, but you can also use the money you bring in to upgrade the camp overall with things like a chicken coop, boat, or better horse care. Bringing animals to Pearson both brings the opportunity to bolster the camp's food supplies and to have him make you some upgraded equipment that you'll never actually need. Missions often start organically in the camp from either people coming up to you or getting involved in personal disputes you overhear, like Pearson and Sadie getting into it. The camp is a living being in itself, but it's what happens as you come and go that can make it even better. If you're outside the camp for anything more than a one and done mission, you're likely to do a great deal while you're out and hopefully coming back bringing money, valuables, food, or all of the above. Early in the game, when you can't afford to spend money on the camp's food stocks, you'll gain the habit of grabbing an animal to bring home when you're on your way back. This could easily lead to an interest in the game's hunting. A search for food becomes a new interest turned passion as you find yourself stalking animals all across the map in search of perfect pelts you can have Pearson use to build you new equipment. In your journeys across the map to find different animals, you won't be able to help but stumble on legendary animal hunts that add yet another level of depth to your hunting experience. The newfound love for hunting takes you all across the map as you find yourself discovering stone carvings, Bigfoot skeletons, and having alien encounters. Now you're solving mysteries and digging up buried treasure while searching for mysterious items to scratch off your list. While you ride across the countryside, you'll have violent encounters with Civil War rejects, your rival gang, the O'Driscolls, and depending on what part of the map you're in, you might even run into the fucking clan out in the forest doing whatever they do. Being racist, I guess. Side note, you will always get positive karma for shooting up clan rallies, so have at it. These violent encounters will hone your gun skills, and you might find yourself taking up the sharpshooter challenges to really push the envelope on your aim. This is how the snowball travels downhill in Red Dead 2 as one system feeds into the next until you're fully immersed in the game without even meaning to be. And while I do really like a more convenient fast travel system in a game this big, I think it might be the right choice to have your fast travel options as inconvenient as they are because you just get to see so much of the game going from place to place. Even just popping into cinematic mode to allow your horse to auto run is a soothing experience that's enjoyable. A huge part of the exploration's appeal for me is the people you'll meet throughout the journey and the random encounters you can have. Things like a dude getting kicked by his horse, a man bitten and in need of medicine, or a lady in need of a ride home. Sometimes you'll be wandering around the town just new boot goofing, and you'll run into a guy shouting about white supremacy or some dumb shit, so you beat the fuck out of him, just like he deserves. I've done several playthroughs of the game, and I'll find a notable number of new encounters every time. I intended to just gloss over the random encounters right here, but on my most recent replay of the game in preparation for this video, I was reminded of just how much of an experience this game is made up of these random encounters, especially if you spend a notable amount of time outside the main story just exploring the world. For reference, the folder for just random encounters that I clipped is larger than the entire main storyline folder for Chapter 4, which is 13 very involved missions. Something I really didn't know about before is the level of gang interaction you can have from town to town. The O'Driscolls are an obvious one, and it's pretty likely you'll get into at least one dust-up with them over the course of your playthrough. I tended to run into them outside of bars, which usually led to a fistfight after words being traded back and forth, which is always a good time. Then you get into an area around roads, and you're likely to get into a Lemoyne Raiders more than once. Even running into their camps, listening to them talk like they're still in the war. If you can approach quietly enough, they don't notice you. This is also a fine opportunity to use that dynamite you've been running around with for who knows how long. I'm unclear if the literal clan members you run into are part of the Raiders or not, but regardless, it's hilarious to watch their pre-programmed nature of finding ways to kill themselves before you finish off any terrified, scattering survivors. This is going to sound weird coming from a black dude, but I am so glad they bothered to add the clan into the game. The gangs do actually get a little bit more interesting the deeper you get into the game and find yourself exploring new areas. The Skinners are more animal than people who usually enjoy hanging corpses as traps or dropping the person down sends them into a violent frenzy. It can honestly be a little unnerving. The most interesting group, however, has to be the Murphy Brood. They're a sick, twisted group that you should have no problem gunning down. As it turns out, they're fiercely territorial. During free roam, you'll set up your campsite to rest, cook, craft, and fast travel, but if you do it in the Murphy country, they'll show up to warn you that it's not allowed. They'll leave in relative peace the first time, but you're also free to just gun them down, refusing to be intimidated. But after that, you're liable to have them show up ready for a fight whenever you set up camp in their area. Their on-road ambushes also will increase in frequency, making you more aware of where you are at any given point. It's interesting because in most games, unexpected combat will become a serious irritation late into the game, but they manage to keep the engagement so short, quick, and unexpected that they actually stay relatively fun, especially if you have the right weapons on hand to turn the tide. A semi-auto shotgun with explosive rounds is a personal favorite. But as good as the random encounters are, some of these stories do go a little bit deeper. These are the stranger side quests, and while I think they fit perfectly in this line of conversation, it's dipping into spoiler territory, so I'd like to give you your warning right here. I'll move on to the main story after this, so you'll be safe from all spoilers past this timestamp here. Everybody good? Alright, let's go. The Strangers in Red Dead 2 fall somewhere in between side missions and random encounters, although some are longer and more enjoyable than even some main story missions. You aren't likely to see every single one to play through unless you're putting in some serious hours, and I really like that because it means you usually have something new to find in newer playthroughs. There's really a wide range of activities strangers will have you do, like kicking some twins in the nuts, tracking down some rather dubious circus animals, or helping with the invention of the electric chair to bring in the modern era of humane executions.
So humane! Ah! Oh, his life may have been troubled, but his passing is peaceful! Kill him already! Somebody shoot me, please.
Oh my god, What the fuck? Oh, I was lied to. That was horrible. Oh my god, what have I fucking done? Holy shit. Oh my god, quick, cut to the clip of me kicking that guy in the nuts. Nope, that didn't make me feel better at all. Let's just move it along. Jesus Christ. So, yeah, that was. Sorry. But there are some genuinely special stranger quests in this game. I have several that stand out, but we'll just talk about two in the hopes of leaving some surprises for you if you do play the game. The first that comes to mind is the man writing a story about the famous gunslinger Boy Calloway, who enlists your help tracking down people who knew him during his golden years. I like this one because it's a window into the realities of Old West legends as we meet both hard people who lived hard lives and people who just did bad things. From the steadfast Black Belle to Billy Midnight, who lives constantly in fear of the sins of his past, you'll get the picture that Boy Calloway wasn't all he was made out to be, with most painting a picture of a scared killer who hung around until the shooting started. And when you're tasked with rounding up an old rival of his for one last showdown, you see this firsthand when he shoots him in the back after Slim Grant refuses to play his game. You'll end up shooting him yourself just like you did most of his friends used loosely here, and that's when the writer will choose the history he wants written and complete your quest line. It's bittersweet, but it will take you to most quarters of the map and let you live out your quick draw fantasies. My other favorite mission is what I can only describe as nice. Arthur Morgan will do his fair share of bad things over the course of this game, but it's clearly evident there's a good man hidden under a lifetime of hardship. But as time starts to run out, we get a chance to show up the best side of Mr. Morgan. Up in the hills north of Annisburg late in the game, you can run across a widow who's just buried her beloved husband and has now found herself all alone in a strange place. Being city folk, they don't know how to survive out here, but it was their dream, and she finds herself standing tall, willing to carry on for both of them, refusing to return to just what she knows. Arthur will take it upon himself to share what he's learned over the years, teaching her first to hunt and then later on how to shoot. With Arthur's help and her mettle, it seems she'll be able to make it out here. And while it's small, this kindness is a shining example of the man Arthur Morgan can be. You can also actually rob this poor woman, but we're not going to talk about mean Arthur Morgan because I don't like him. There's a ton of depth in strangers to be found here, but it's only a pond compared to the vast ocean that is the main story. And that's where I'd like to take you now because there's so much to talk about. The realities of a prequel are something that even the best writers will struggle to work around, simply in that anyone who's played the game that came out before it will know how this one ends. We know for the most part what becomes of Dutch's gang and where John will end up, so playing him isn't the most interesting thing in the world past a certain point. But if you could introduce a new character who has his own odyssey we get to experience, one where we can watch from arm's reach how John's past develops him into the man that we know he will become in the original Red Dead Redemption, well, that might work. Arthur Morgan is one of the best written characters you will ever find in video games, with the depth so rarely found in any writing, let alone gaming. Tag on the medium in which he is presented that allows you to layer on your own interpretation of what kind of man he is, and we elevate him onto a new plane. For the purposes of this video, I will only be discussing a high honor Arthur, because frankly, I can't stand playing him any other way, and I think that the juxtaposition between his kind heart and the hard man he's become to survive in a tough world make him so much more interesting. We'll be briefly going over each chapter in the game so we can get a solid view of the story and how it progresses, but there's going to be a ton left out, there's just no way around that. But it leaves lots of you guys to experience on your own. The introduction section up in the mountain town of Colter isn't what I consider fun, but all things considered, I think it's actually really good for the game as it goes on to make you really feel the weight of the circumstances the gang is under as you meet them. If it had been concerned with player retention to the point that you only spent a few minutes there, it wouldn't have had the same effect. Spending hours trudging through the snow, looking for John who's barely clinging on to life, searching for food to feed a hungry people, and coming across your bitter rivals in the O'Driscolls isn't my idea of fun, but the truth is that it's supposed to suck. And when you're desperate to survive, you'll learn skills you probably wouldn't have even bothered with had they been presented later in the game. I have to imagine that seeing green for the first time on your way to a train robbery is entirely intentional, tying your nefarious actions with hope so early into the game. With some money in your pocket and the snow melting, you'll finally head back down the mountain to a land of sunshine and new opportunities. Compared to Colter, Valentine is a paradise, and also one of my favorite parts in the game. The Valentine chapter of the game is when you get to spend a little bit of time living out your cowboy fantasy before it all goes wrong. You'll do a little bit of everything in this chapter, from protecting the girls, running down a snitch, getting into a bar fight, taking on bounty hunters, going through a jailbreak, and eventually robbing a train with your pals in one of the best cinematic moments I've seen in games. Although, that's just par for the course here in Red Dead 2. Apart from taking on your spaghetti western playlist, you'll also get to spend a decent amount of time getting into scraps with the O'Driscoll boys, as you both have a solid presence in town. But while you'll spend a good amount of time doing the tough guy stuff that makes Arthur so respected among the group, you'll also have a few moments where you get to see the kinder side of him when you do things like going hunting with Hosea, taking Jack fishing, or going out for a night on the town with Lenny. But it shows the best when he receives a letter from his old love in Mary, who calls on him for help when she has nowhere else to turn. After beating down Big Timmy, cutting a bloody swath through an entire town to free Micah, and tearing away at every O'Driscoll he comes across, it can be a real shock to see Arthur not only kind and gentle, but vulnerable.
Listen, Arthur, I'm... my family. I need your help.
You mean the family that always looked down on me? And you want me to help them?
It's my little brother, Jamie.
I always liked Jamie, at least compared to the rest of them.
It's an early look into the realities of Arthur's life as he gives everything to those who need him, only to be left alone time and time again with nothing to see for his efforts, but another hand reaching out to him in need. His journal entry after Mary is one of the best in the game, I think.
I feel like the luckiest man alive, and I feel like a fool. That woman confuses me and plays me for a fiddle like no one else alive. I trust I will not make a god-awful fool of myself once more, but somehow I imagine I shall.
Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end, as after spending time working the town and having your fun, the sins of your past will catch up to you after you do a little bit of wrestling with John. You'll head into town to meet Strauss and Dutch in one of the bars before Leviticus Cornwall shows up. He happens to be the one who's trained you Rob back up on the mountain, and as it turns out, he didn't forget about it quite as quickly as you did, tracking all the way down to Valentine. With an injured Strauss to take care of, you boys will shoot your way out of the town, making one hell of a mess of the place as you do, which means you have to pick up and leave as soon as you get back to camp. You and Charles will be sent to scout out a spot Michael told Dutch about, and naturally, it sucks. But after a short ride and finding a family's missing father, you'll return the man safely while finding a decent spot to camp in Clemins Point, kicking off Chapter 3. This is where we will find ourselves camped outside of Rhodes, a town run by two feuding families in the Braithwaites and the Greys, old money families fighting a war over long-lost golds and original sins old enough to be forgotten. Dutch and Hosea will decide to get us right into the middle of it, trying to play both sides in search of this so-called gold. You start off becoming deputized for the town sheriff, who happens to be part of the Grey family, and wouldn't you know it, one of his biggest worries will be rooting out the Braithwaite moonshine, which will put you on their bad side, along with the Lemoyne Raiders, who they were trying to sell it to when you showed up to take it. This chapter is where you really start to see the desperation of the gang show as you put yourselves in worse and worse situations hoping to turn a profit. But it does lead to some interesting experiences. Hosea may be seen as the more soft-hearted of the pair, but he has some fucking stones on him. Walking right up to the Braithwaite Manor to sell back the liquor we stole from them, and actually getting away with it, is an insane moment. It also leads to another visually spectacular moment in the game as you and Sean break into the Grey's place and burn their fields to the ground during the night, leading to a fantastic gunfight among the smoke and the fire. There's an even better cinematic moment, but we'll get to that right after we talk about walking into an obvious trap and what I think is the turning point between Arthur and the gang. Colm O'Driscoll's boys extend an offer of peace talks, and the snake in Dutch's ear named Micah convinces him to attend, with Arthur providing overwatch. As short as the conversation is, it manages a level of tension in the dialogue that brings me back to all-time great scenes, like that of Inglourious Basterds' bar scene. It really is that good.
Lot of heat on us this time. Both of us. Whole heap of trouble. They offered me a price, Dutch, to bring you in.
Why didn't you take it?
Well, still might.
I am sorry about your brother.
Yeah, well, I never liked him much.
I liked Annabelle.
You always loved the ladies, Dutch Vanderlyn. I like that about you.
What are we doing here? Go home. Is this thing over?
So Arthur ends up captured, and I meant it when I say it's more than just a turning point for the gang, but Arthur's relationship with them. When John goes missing on the mountain, they call Arthur. When Micah is in prison, they send Arthur. Sean needs rescuing, Arthur. Trelawney taken by bounty hunters, Arthur. Tilly taken by her old gang, Arthur. If you need an extra gun or help on a run into town, it's Arthur. That's who he is. He helps everyone. But when you're taken, during a mission you told Dutch would be a trap and asked him not to ride on, no one comes. You're left to fight your way out all on your own, riding back to camp an inch from death to find no one on their way to get you. It's painful proof that Dutch is slipping and it will only get worse from here, but not before disaster strikes. You're led into yet another ambush by Bill, and Sean pays the price for it, taking a bullet to the head from the Greys as you shoot your way out of Rhodes just to get back to camp and find another disaster, as it turns out Jack was taken by the Braithwaite, which kicks off one of the coolest scenes in gaming history as the fury of our little family is unleashed upon the manor. From a storytelling perspective, it's astonishingly good. In your own mind, you're reestablishing that the gang is a force for good, mounting an attack on a great evil to save the innocent. Lines have been crossed, and you're a force for good, cutting a bloody swath through those who would stoop so low as to touch a small child. And while at any other time, Dutch dragging an old woman by the collar through her burning house before threatening her would be cause for alarm. In this moment, however, it feels entirely justified in the search for Jack. It also gives you enough time worrying about more pressing issues to worry about your own problems within the group. Not to mention the sense of unity a pair of Pinkertons coming to get Dutch instills within our family yet again. After clearing out Shady Belle to move the gang into, now that our camp has been found, we'll ride into Saint Denis in search of this man Angelo Bronte who took Jack. Kicking off Chapter 4. Saint Denis is just one bad idea after another from the time we get Jack back. I'm not sure it's intended, but looking back at it, there's a bit of an ominous tone set when our first mission after finding Jack is set in a graveyard, foreshadowing the people we'll lose in this city. We do get a moment of reprieve upon returning home with Jack as the gang throws a party to celebrate, and it's overall a good time, but then it's back to business. Dutch will accept Senor Bronte's invitation to the mayor's party and actually believe that he's on our side, but he's so obviously not. This is also the time in which Tilly is taken by her old gang in a bid for revenge for killing one of them, and will ride out with Miss Grimshaw to get her girl back. The one positive moment we'll have in this chapter is helping Rains Fall and his son Eagle Flies, natives screwed over by the government who we helped steal some files from an oil refinery, which, as usual, looks fantastic bathed in the fires during the night, but that's pretty much our only good deed. The mutilated corpse of Kieran will be the kicking off point of an O'Driscoll raid on our camp. That poor kid, man. He never wanted this life. It was so clear. He wasn't built for it, but he was dragged into it, and then we dragged him in the middle of our own blood feud against the O'Driscolls, and he was the one who paid for it. This tragedy is followed by the botched robbery of the trolley station set up by Bronte to get us killed before we go breaking our own rules and launch an attack on his mansion in a poorly veiled revenge mission. I will admit that working our way through Bronte's mansion, shotgun in hand, is great fun when we get another look at how far Dutch is slipping as he kills Bronte in a rage after he insults him. This isn't the peak of our folly, though. It really goes bad during the robbery of the city bank. We get interrupted by Pinkertons that leads to the death of both Hosea and Lenny, with John being captured and us forced to flee onto a boat. Just when it couldn't get any worse, the ship goes down and we'll wind up washed ashore in Chapter 5, otherwise known as Guarma. There's no other way around it. Guarma sucks. It's an interesting concept, to be sure, stranding you without all your fancy gear, forcing you to fight with whatever you can scavenge against a superior enemy in foreign territory. The truth, though, is that it's an hour and a half to 2 hours of gameplay that you just don't really care about, doing nothing but working your way back to the story you want to be taking part in. Don't get me wrong, it's nice to be able to help out the natives who are fighting for their freedom, but certainly not doing it out of the goodness of our hearts, so how many good guy points does it really win us? The only overall story beat we really give is Dutch killing an old woman for the crime of asking for what she was promised, which seems like the next step in his progression from hero to outright villain of this story, but all it really does is remove any nuance from the character. He's done a lot of things escalating his evil over the course of the game, but there was always at least some small way you could justify it, or at least you could see how he could justify it to himself, but this is different, as he becomes unredeemable in the eyes of almost everyone who plays this. And it's not like the game is trying to play it off, as Arthur brings this moment up constantly for the rest of the game when he questions Dutch's motives. The only upside I can give is that being the only one who sees these actions and not bringing it up to anyone else that I'm aware of is possibly the reason Arthur can understand how far Dutch has fallen, why others can't. That's as much credit as I'm giving it, though. As for the rest of the island, having no way to return once the chapter ends means there's essentially nothing to do outside the main quest line, which makes the island feel boring and restrictive compared to the rest of the game that feels so very alive. I can only assume that the developers just wanted to give some way to justify the gang getting out alive after another massive robbery without just shooting up an entire town yet again. And for that I understand, but this just wasn't the way to do it. It drags the game to essentially a halt, and the downsides outweigh the benefits, and I think the only real major misstep the game makes across the main questline is right here. Off the top of my head, I think a better option would have actually been to have the robbery go well. We get out of town with little to no trouble from the law, with tons of money and a light at the end of the tunnel. A victory like this would have been all Dutch needed to keep us stringing along. Then maybe even convince the gang the best thing to do is finally go after the money in Blackwater, and in the process walk us into a trap that causes the death of Hosea and Lenny along with the capture of John. Something along those lines, or even riding directly on Cornwall. Anything but Guarma, man, I don't know. Anyway, me playing armchair developer isn't going to help anything, so whatever. After a final battle to rescue your boat captain and kill Fusar, you'll sail right back into the Lion's Mouth, seeking out where your gang has been hiding in your absence. You'll receive a hero's welcome, and then you'll find yourself ambushed not long after by the Pinkertons. After dealing with that, you and Charles will be sent to clear out the next and last place you'll call home in the game in Beaver Hollow. A truly unsettling experience as you clear out the cannibalistic Murphy brood and rescue the only living hostage you find inside. Just after your good deed, you'll come back to camp to find one Miss Molly O'Shea screaming and crying about how much she loved Dutch, telling him that she's the one who betrayed us to the Pinkertons. Arthur tries to defuse the situation, understanding that things might not be as they seem, but Miss Grimshaw isn't interested in your excuses, shooting Molly without a second thought. She knew the rules, is what she says. But of all the rules we've broken in the last week, this truly feels like the best one. Regardless of your feelings about it, this will kick off Chapter 6, Beaver Hollow. Chapter 6 no longer hints at the hope of a happy ending. One of the first things you'll do is ride into Saint Denis, and you'll collapse when you do so. A kind stranger will drag you to a doctor. In a strange way, he shows you more kindness than your own gang has, but that's neither here nor there. It doesn't take long for the doctor to figure out you've got tuberculosis, and that it's terminal. Most likely from your beating of Mr. Downs over the money he owed Strauss. It's a cruel twist of fate watching Arthur's past evils catch up with him long after he's done his best to do better for the world. This terminal illness will go on to have a profound effect on Arthur, as he will dedicate what little time he has left on being a better person and helping who he can. His character will shine through so brightly at the end of his life that it's amazing any amount of hardness he built up over the years was ever able to stifle the brilliant light of who he was. But we aren't finished yet, and there's work to be done. First things first, we'll go with Sadie to break John out of prison before he's hanged. It's a bit of a sloppy rescue, and Dutch isn't happy to see him, but in the end, we get him out alive, which is all that matters. After that, we'll head to Annisburg to witness more of Dutch's unraveling rage, picking a fight with Cornwall that we don't need as we tear through a town's worth of Pinkertons. This is where the story will diverge just a bit, as we're given the option of helping Rainsfall and his people once more, and I recommend doing so. It's painfully clear the army is hell-bent on driving the natives to war, and when we find a destroyed sacred site among with stolen items, we'll sneak into the army camp to get them back without adding to the conflict. Arthur will also steal some medicine being withheld from the tribe and ride out with the chief's son Eagleflies to take back stolen horses being held on a boat. After which we will accompany Rainsfall to be present for peace talks. Unfortunately, when the general in charge takes a personal vendetta against the only man who actually wants the best for the tribe and attempts to have him killed under false charges, we hop into action to get him out of there. It's only going to make a hopeless situation worse, but at least we're able to save one good man. Speaking of good men, however, we'll run into someone you may or may not know from earlier in the game. You can do some side missions helping the church, and if you did, you'll know Sister Calderon, who has something kind to say about Arthur's character, but we're going to save that for later. We get one more happy-ish moment in the game in the midst of all the misery. The law is caught up with Comwell Driscoll, and along with Dutch and Sadie, we head out to make sure he swings. It's probably the last semblance of a bond between Dutch and Arthur, but it is worth bringing up to mention the last time that it actually seems as though Arthur has something good happen to him. That being said, he'll return to camp to find a letter from Mary saying her final goodbyes. I don't know why, but it just broke my heart to see it, and I can only imagine how Arthur felt.
You've broken my heart again, and I fear I have broken yours. And for that, I will never forgive myself, but you must let me go now. I enclose a ring you gave me many years ago, when we were both young. Not because I don't like it, but because I care for it far too much, and it reminds me too much of you. I hope one day you will find some people in love who can use this, for it kept me thinking of you all these years, and I hope by returning it to you, I can finally be free. Goodbye, Mary.
Eagleflies will end up captured and will go with Charles to break him out of the fort in a daring but very enjoyable mission. Unfortunately, he doesn't seem to learn from this lesson, and after all the work Dutch has done to stir up the tribe and the army against each other, the powder keg finally goes off as the boy leads a war party against the oil factory, against the wishes of a pleading father who knows all too well the consequences of war against these people. All he wants to do is try to find peace, but in that effort, we'll end up leading our own war party and wading into the fray, taking the fight to them, saving as many as we can, eventually winning the day. As if it's any surprise, Dutch was only after the money stored in the office here, but that's really par for the course at this point. If you think back to the bank robbery, we'll know that John was captured. After his rescue, he'll say that Dutch saw it happen, and it seemed like there was a moment where he could have done something but didn't. An offhanded comment you'll likely have forgotten about with everything going on. But then this happens.
I need help!
You silly fool!
Without the help of Eagleflies, this would have been the end of Arthur's story, and he knows it. He even calls Dutch out on it the moment he sees him, but he's loyal beyond default and will question if it even happened the ways he know it did. There's a detail I missed here until just this moment. When this mission ends, the game will remind you how the system works. If you do work for the gang, then the gang gets half and the men on the job get a slice of what's left. You'll see that you don't get a penny from the overall take. Just twisting the knife at this point. This is the point in which you'll want to save the game, as it's the last mission right after this. Dutch will gather the gang for one last train job, one last ride, as if we haven't all heard that before. But just like every other time, you'll get into the saddle and ride out alongside him. In the end, you get the money, but you'll lose John and come back to find out that they took Abigail. Against all his supposed principles, Dutch is convinced not to go get her. Even as Arthur begs, he's willing to let Jack become an orphan in order to save himself. So you and Sadie will ride out alone to get her back. You'll cover Sadie as she pushes through the town before getting blindsided in the room with Abigail and Milton, forcing you to go out and get them yourself. You'll find out that Micah was the rat all along, all before being saved by the woman you just saved. Don't let it be said she doesn't repay her debts. You'll send them on their way to safety in an emotional scene before going back to tell everyone about Micah, Arthur's last act, and he knows it.
John, I want you to know this. He loved you. He loved you, and Jack, he did. He wasn't perfect, but he did. Now, you gotta go get that boy. Come on, get out of here.
Arthur, what are you doing?
I gotta go have a little chat before I get much sicker.
No, Arthur.
Don't you owe Arthur me. Neither of you two. Not now. You both know. You're good women. Good people. The best. Yeah.
The many miles we walk, the many things we learn.
On the ride back, you'll be treated to a beautiful score and the words of some people you helped along the way, reminding you of the good you did in your final hour. When you call out Micah upon your return, you'll get one final standoff as the battle lines are drawn. Dutch will pick a rat over the man who has stood by him for over 20 years, proof of how far he's fallen. To her credit, Miss Grimshaw knows who we are and stands alongside us, taking a bullet from the traitor, the price of her integrity. With Pinkertons flooding the area, we'll go with John to get him back to his family's safety. You'll be given the option to go back for the money, but I just can't imagine a world in which Arthur would do that. Something that really hits home is that in the midst of all this chaos, with the world closing in on him, Arthur will take the time to comfort his dying horse, taking the time to thank his constant companion for everything they had been through together. It really speaks to the caring nature of Arthur. You'll make one last stand against the Pinkertons, while giving John time to escape before getting your final showdown with Micah. It's a sloppy, painful back-and-forth battle that in the end, some ways Arthur loses, unable to stop the man who unraveled his family and his way of life.
I gave you all I had. I did. John made it. He's the only one. The rest of us... No. But I tried. In the end, I did.
There was a poem written by a war chief named Tecumseh called Live Your Life, in which he states,
So live your life, that the fear of death can never enter your heart. Love your life, perfect your life, beautify all things in your life. Seek to make your life long and its purpose in the service of people. When it comes time to die, be not like those whose hearts are filled with the fear of death, so that when their time comes, they weep and pray for a little more time to live their lives over again in a different way. Sing your death song, and die like a hero going home.
I can only imagine this being the embodiment of Arthur's end. He will spend his last moments beaten, broken, betrayed, but with a heart filled with joy, knowing that he was able to save John and his family, knowing that they would get to go on and live the life he had always dreamed of. He did right by those around him, and he will get to fade away watching the sunrise, a representation of the good he did and the man he was. I have a lot more to say about Arthur Morgan, but while his story is over, Red Dead Redemption 2 isn't. There is a lengthy epilogue, and we need to get through it before we can finish spoilers, so hold tight, and we'll get back to our favorite cowboy soon enough. Our epilogue will follow one John Marston in his quest to build a life for himself and his family in the wake of what happened. It's not going to be easy, but he does his best to live an honest life as we pick up a few years later as they come to the town of Strawberry looking for honest work. We find it after taking a load out to Pronghorn Ranch for the general store in town, talking your way into a job as a ranch hand. It's pretty mundane work, milking cows, shoveling shit, building fences and all that, but at the end of the day, it's honest and pretty peaceful. You'll even get to spend some time with Jack teaching him how to ride a horse. You'll even get a happy Abigail for once, proud of the man you're being. It can't last, though, as you're called into action when trouble comes looking for us. There's men looking to strong-arm the owner into selling, and John will beat one down when he sees him trying to intimidate one of the other hands. They'll come back that night, steal the cattle from the ranch, and John will spring into action doing what he knows best, helping to fight the men off. When he's called on by his boss to ride with them, he'll do so against the wishes of Abigail, as they head back to get their livelihood back. John will lead the raid against the ranch and will do most of the heavy lifting in terms of combat, letting slip the man from his past once again, but for good reason this time. This isn't how his wife will see it, though, and after someone in town recognizes him picking up mail and tries to shoot him down on the road back from Strawberry, it will be the last straw. Abigail will leave with Jack to protect her son from John's inability to avoid violence. This will spur John to do something he never thought he'd do. With the confidence of Mr. Getty's cosign, he'll head to Blackwater and take out a bank loan to buy a lot at Beecher's Hope that Abigail had told him about. It's really just a shack and a dirt lot, but it's John's, and he'll do his best to make something of it. That being said, making money as a rancher isn't really what he knows how to do, so when Sadie reaches out about some bounty work, he'll pick up his guns and go hunting because he needs that money. Loan secured, John will run into another problem as Uncle spots him coming out of the bank. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Thankfully, Uncle will lead us to finding Charles, who we are actually happy to see. And with them at our side, we start building a ranch. We'll start actually building something. With money from Sadie's bounty hunting to fill in the gaps, we'll expand our line of credit to buy a pre-cut house and a barn of all things. After tearing down that little shack and clearing room, we'll pick up the lumber for our new house. Unfortunately, on the way back from the house, we'll run into Skinner Brother ambush, but we'll only lose one of the hired guns in the shootout, although he was a nice guy. Leaving the Skinners behind, we'll have just a lovely time building the new house. No, seriously, if you haven't played it, it's just great fun. Check it out.
Well, let me have a rule and a saw and a board and I'll cut it. I'll climb up a ladder with a hammer and a nail and I'll nail it. Well, we worked so hard to build a little house together.
ice cold wind whenever, no matter what the weather, we're together.
After another bounty and getting the barn set up, we'll right back to Abigail asking her to come back, and the boys will celebrate with some song and drink. Unfortunately, as things go, trouble finds them as they wake up to find the Skinner brothers have taken Uncle in the night. We'll go after him and find a grisly sight as they had him on a rack over a fire. We'll kill all the Skinner brothers and get him out of there, but he's in a bad way. Time passes as he heals, and John will really start adjusting to life as a rancher. His persistence is paid off as Abigail and Jack do, in fact, come back and are happy to see him in their new home. Enjoy your life of peace and do yourself some chorin'. Actually, do a lot of chorin'. Copious amounts of chorin'. A great deal of chorin', you might say. Oodles of chorin'. Scores of chorin'. Plentiful amounts of chorin'. Exorbitant amounts of chorin'. Really and truly a shitload of chorin'. A fuckload of chorin', you might say. Oh my god, so much fucking chorin'. Fuck this. I'm going bounty hunting with Sadie. How could it possibly be worse than any of this? Okay, point made. Back to being a family man. Let's go do some dad stuff, I guess, like taking Jack fishing in a nearby pond and sucking the venom out of a dog's leg after he's been bitten by a snake. You know, just normal dad stuff. Then we'll actually get to spend some time with Abigail on a run into town, spending an absurd amount of time changing poses and backgrounds to get it just right. We'll get our photo taken, then pop over to the Imperial Theater to catch a show. One of the moving picture shows, no less. Then we'll get a moment that surprised me. John will borrow a boat and row us out into the lake before asking Mary a very important question.
Will you marry me?
Get up. I am married to you.
No, I mean proper, in front of God.
You serious?
I got this ring. I've had it for a long time. Take it.
You serious?
It would make me very happy.
I'd like to point out that the small detail is that this ring is actually the very same one Arthur used to propose to Mary, and the one that she returned to him at the end of chapter 6. It's a small thing, but I like to think that it brings Arthur a little bit of joy knowing that the ring he bought for his love is being used to connect to people he fought so hard to save, while they lived the life that he wanted to. It's a nice moment that will fly under the radar for some of us, and I just wanted to appreciate it. Time with John will almost be at an end here, but there is one bit of business left to attend to. Sadie will ride to our doorstep and let us know that she found a lead on Micah, and we can go get him right now. Abigail will not want us to go. This is something that has to be done, and so with Sadie and Charles, we'll ride out in search of a rat. Our lead will take us to one of his buddies in Strawberry, and after getting the information, we'll ride out far into the mountains and fight our way up a hill against the gang. Charles will take a hit early on, but it's not fatal, so we'll push on without him on the promise that he'll be following us up. About halfway up, we'll get jumped by a couple guys, and Sadie will take a knife to the side while fighting him off, but is saved by Charles, who, true to his word, was following us up, only slowly. You'll make the rest of the journey to the camp alone, and it's a pretty arduous climb through the deep snow up to the top, taking fire the whole way up. At the end of the path, you'll find a cabin with none other than Micah Belle inside. A few words are exchanged before you get to what I guess passes as a boss fight in this game. Kind of pointless, but the fight gives Sadie time to work her way up and catch Micah from his blind side. Before we can finish him off, though, another player will enter the game.
Hello, son. Mrs. Adler. It's been quite a while.
Now, John. Now. What were you saying?
We find ourselves in a bit of a Mexican standoff, but talk long enough and you'll actually get one last gesture from Dutch as he shoots the rat before we finish him off ourselves.
You shot me.
You shot me pretty good.
Dutch will walk off without a word, and after finding the money that we spent the whole game in search of, we'll ride home with our injured comrades. The credits roll, and we'll get a window into the years that separate Red Dead 2 with Red Dead 1, with John and Abigail's wedding, Charles and Sadie departing, a few moments showing us what our old friends are up to, and how the raid on Micah led the Pinkertons to John's door. For now, though, you're left to free roam and finish anything that Arthur didn't get to. As long as the overview was, I can't stress how much the scale of it is dwarfed by actually playing through the story yourself. I strive to leave surprises for those who play the game after one of my spotlights while giving you a complete picture of the story, and the depth of Red Dead 2 made for a tricky balance. The story isn't perfect, there are mistakes here and there, but they are drops in a bucket that spans the width of an ocean. I love so much about this story, and frankly, I can't imagine anyone who could make their way through it and not hold Arthur Morgan in high regard by the time they're done. The only thing I really don't think it did was add much to Red Dead 1, as I would have liked, but I haven't played it in a couple years, so maybe it's worth a replay to see if I'm wrong. With the story over, however, there's something I really want to say about our protagonist. I believe that Arthur Morgan's story is one of the most relatable tragedies I've ever experienced. I might be adding a little too much of myself to the story, and I'm sorry for that, but I felt like from very early on I understood this man on a deep level, and I can only hope to find an ounce of the strength that he showed me. One thing that the scale of the game allowed for us is that nothing Arthur did was really forgotten. If you saved a man out in the wilderness, you're likely to run into him again in town thanking you for your help. People in shops will remember hearing of your actions around town, and if you complete some optional missions, you can find the fate of those he's had dealings with in a larger capacity, good or bad. Arthur's story in many ways is tied with that of the Downs family. He'll in a lot of ways ruin their life, killing the father, which traps the boy in a mine he has no business working in, and his mother with nothing left to offer but her body to the worst of men. While it's true that Arthur's TB might be the best thing to ever happen to him, giving him the perspective to be a better man as his life fades away, it's fitting that his life would come to an end from bringing someone else's too early. As much good as he tries to do towards the end, he knows in his heart that he brought any evil he suffers upon himself. In one of the optional missions on the reservations, he'll tell Rainsfall that he learned long ago that you don't get to be a bad person and have good things happen to you. But I like to think that even if he didn't make up for all the bad things he did, the moments where he could do good were the moments that showed who Arthur truly was. It's easy to see over the course of the game how Arthur would have a negative opinion on the man he was. To many he was a villain, a brutal and callous man who brought nothing but pain, but to some he was a gentle, caring man who brought nothing but peace. And that's something you likely won't know until the sister says it in one of the most powerful moments in the game, tucked away at a little train station. Here's said scene I mentioned earlier.
I've lived a bad life, sister.
We've all lived bad lives, Mr. Morgan. We all sin. But I know you.
You don't know me.
Forgive me, but that's the problem. You don't know you.
What do you mean?
I don't know, but whenever we happen to meet, you're always helping people and smiling.
I had a son. He passed away. I had a girl who loved me. I threw that away. My mama died when I was a kid. And my daddy, well, I watched him die. That weren't soon enough. I guess I'm afraid.
There is nothing to be afraid of, Mr. Morgan. Take a gamble that love exists and do a loving act.
I put a lot of stock into the concept that different people can meet a different you, and that there's almost never a person out there who has a complete picture of the person you really are, for better or for worse. I've said for years I wish anyone who could meet me for the first time could meet me at a racetrack, because it's the happiest, loudest, kindest version of myself, and it makes me wish that anyone could meet the best version of Arthur Morgan. To the Downs, he's just the man that murdered the man they loved. To the people in Valentine, he's the guy who beat down Big Timmy, and to many unfortunate debtors who took money from Herr Strauss, he's the man who came to beat them. But to Charlotte, the widow, north of Annisburg, he is the man who showed her kindness in her lowest moment and taught her how to survive a world she was lost in. To Penelope Braithwaite and Beau Gray, he's the man who fought for their love when their own families would have killed them for it. And to so many like Eagle Flies, Tilly Jackson, Sean McGuire, John Marston, Sadie Adler, and many more, he was the man who saved their life. He was Uncle Arthur who took Jack fishing and went to get Jamie Linton. Speaking of which, maybe Mary was one of the few who knew all parts of him. For all the bad things he had done, Arthur is the man she knew she could call when she needed help. And while she might not have been able to wait for him, it's clear his passing was no easy thing for her either. One of the really nice things that you'll get during the epilogue is to run into people Arthur knew from years ago. And while it's nice to bump into Tilly, Mary Beth, or Pearson, it's something more to run into those that remember Arthur and speak of him fondly. You can see Mickey and Valentine, the one-armed soldier who, way back, Arthur could have chosen to show a kindness to that most people wouldn't have. He'll misremember his name as Alan, but he'll remember him as being one of the good ones, another person who met the best Arthur. On a more touching note will be Rainsfall, who we can see in Annisburg. He seems pained by the world when speaking of what's left of his people, but when John mentions that Arthur saved his life before his passing, he will say that it doesn't surprise him one bit. The last is my favorite name you've heard me bring up over and over again, in Charlotte, the widow who's doing just fine now thanks to Arthur's help. For all of Arthur's faults, I truly believe he's one of the best men to ever be portrayed in a game, not because he was always good, but because he had a kind heart that he still showed to the world no matter how many times they had betrayed it. Good men mean well, they just don't always do well. It seems to me that he was a kinder man when no one was looking. His journal he kept being a small window into the world, with his writings on things showing a man who, left to his own devices, might have just roamed the world finding joy in life. It was a rare thing to see, but when he found moments of happiness, he smiled brightly and laughed loudly, bringing in a light to a room that you wouldn't think him capable of. He was a man who loved deeply and honestly, even if it didn't always come back to him. He was loyal until his last, even dying for loyalty in the end, but finally learning to be loyal to what mattered. I'm so happy that he got to die looking at one last sunrise, a tribute to the warmth and the light he brought into the world whenever he could.
You did your worst, you tried your best. Now it's time to rest. Now it's time to rest.
How do I even begin to sum up my thoughts on this masterpiece of game development? I really held back from talking about this game for a long time. I just knew that at the end of the day it would end up with my long-winded rambling about how good it is, but that's essentially what I've done here. But I've thought it through and realized that there's nothing wrong with joining a chorus singing praise. It's not the same as joining in with the mob who are kicking someone when they're down. There's never a world where showing appreciation for something that's great is a bad thing. Estimates say around 2,000 people worked for over 8 years to bring this beautiful thing to life, and honestly, if even one of them hears my voice shouting out to tell them how amazing it is, I think that'll be worth it. On top of that, there's new gamers born every day, and anyone I can reach and convince to play this gem, well, that's worth it to me, because this is one of those games I think everyone would be better off playing. There's some things out there that just earned it. Every part of this game is phenomenal. Its confidence to allow such a slow burn on the story, especially at the beginning, which allowed the characters time to grow and become something so damn special. There are side missions here that I found more impactful and memorable than entire AAA campaigns made this year. Arthur may have been the star here, but I feel like I know everyone in the cast about as well as I could expect any side character. The way that I feel the pain for the loss of our friends, not always up front. It would hurt later, like when I went to find Sean's grave, or when I finally found that burdock root that Kieran had asked for, or when I finally got a rifle in my hands large enough to track down and kill our monster grizzly bear. I miss them now in ways I've only missed characters in games like Mass Effect. Little details like finding out that even though I had personally thrown Strauss out of the camp, he hadn't breathed a word under Pinkerton interrogation. Maybe not a moral man, but one of principle. As much as I loved all of our cast, you really have to tip your hat to the writing and acting behind Dutch's downfall. They managed to stick a character in front of our faces that we know from the word go will eventually go crazy and betray us, but his fall is so believable. And right from the start, they showed us inklings of the Dutch who had won the gang's trust in the first place. When the gang was cold, hungry, and desperate, he rode out in front of Arthur, paving a path towards hope, not allowing anyone to go in his place. He was kind and compassionate when he found Sadie, being the one to calm her down and show her the kindness she needed to trust us. His charisma, even when we were far past redeemable, kept you wondering if perhaps he really did have a plan, if he really could have gotten us to Tahiti. I wasn't angry when Dutch betrayed us. Like Arthur, I was hurt and I was sad, but I wasn't angry at what he had done because I was just sad that Arthur had lost the last semblance of a happy family. Not to be left out, we have to commend the performance of one evil son of a bitch named Micah Bell. Right from the start, he was mean, vindictive, racist, misogynistic, and just altogether an awful person. There's more than one kind of well-written villain, and while Dutch is the kind that might garner sympathy from the audience, Micah is the one who exists entirely to be hated, and while simple, it's no less effective in the grand scheme of things. We all wanted nothing more than to kill Micah, likely many of us far before the finale, and that kind of emotional response just means he was doing something he was supposed to be. He was the Kai Lang or the Dolores Umbridge of this story. Beyond the story and the characters is simply the most alive world I've ever interacted with in gaming. Little details make all the difference, like the fact that people you interact with will notice Arthur's illness when it gets to the most advanced stages, or how about the fact that if Arthur donates to the building of the library, his name will in fact be on the plaque commemorating early contributors. No two people will act quite the same. Bumping into someone could lead to an apology from them, all the way up to a gunfight depending on how they respond and how you handle it. It's just a level that I can't even explain, you just have to play it. I've discussed before how many games I go back to review and end up making a spotlight on are actually better than I remember, and I don't know how a game I remember being perfect can still qualify on that list. Every time I go through this game, I go a little bit deeper and find so much more than ever before, from getting better at hunting to finally tracking down the serial killer. And a look back at the stories I found so much interest in, not limited to gaming, I found that I often like things without a happy ending. I don't know what it is, but I guess I just have to add this one to the list. It's a powerful thing to bring a tear to my eye while warming my heart at the same time, but damn if you didn't do it. There's really nothing quite like a ride in the countryside as Arthur Morgan. I love John, don't get me wrong, but I loved him in his story, which this isn't. Just like Far Cry Primal, this is one of the times that even after 100 hours spent exploring a game from one end to the other, I find myself itching to go back and do just a little bit more. And truth be told, there's so much more that I could probably go back for the next year and still find something to do. So yeah, Red Dead Redemption 2. A lot of time with that game later, and I can say with confidence that it's the most perfect game I've ever played. Just for fun, because I don't think it's going to happen. If this video hits 500 likes, I'll give away a copy of the game on Steam, because why not? I think someone should get a copy of it. That being said though, guys, I would really appreciate your sub if you think I've earned it. Anyways, enjoy another one of my entirely too abrupt outros. This is Purple signing off. Have a wonderful night, and always remember to smile.